Easy.
Well, welcome into the Rundown on Fox Sports Radio 1400 around the world on the iHeartRadio app. My name is Rob Sanders. Later on, we're going to talk about some coaches that are crybabies, some coaches that, we've got coaches talk later. But first, I want to welcome into the program from Baseball America, Mr. Joe Healy. Joe, what's going on, man? How are you?
Hey, Rob, I'm good. It's that magical time of year, man. I've said it before on your show, I believe, that when the weather gets coldest and we start having winter weather watches and things like that, college baseball is right around the corner. So it's time to get excited about it.
We're like 15 days away. I mean, who's counting? I love college baseball, but I'm jacked up for the college baseball season, and I've got some questions I want to ask you. Of course, you can follow Joe's work at baseballofamerica.com. All kinds of great previews. You do a podcast with your compadre there, Teddy Cahill. Just great stuff. But let's talk a little bit about some interesting things that are on the docket here. We'll start with, it's not going to happen this year, but it's going to happen soon. How big of a drop will the Big 12 have in baseball when Oklahoma and Texas head to the SEC?
Yeah, I mean, it's a pretty big drop when you can, just from the standpoint of, believe it or not, if you take Texas and Oklahoma's national titles out of the equation, Texas has a couple in recent years. Oklahoma won way back in 1994. If you take those two programs out in terms of national titles in the Big 12, you have to go all the way back to, I believe, I don't have it here in front of me, 1959 or something like that, when right. Oklahoma State was still known as Oklahoma A&M. So, just from the history of that is massive. Now, in the short term, Texas obviously a big loss because it does feel like Texas, and we have them number one in our poll. I think most polls, if not all polls, are going to have Texas number one. In the immediate term, that's a really big loss. They are going to be ready to compete in the SEC right away. Now, doesn't mean it's going to be easy for them, but they will be ready to compete right away. Oklahoma is another story. They're going to have a little bit of work to do. Their facility is a little bit behind, even in terms of the Big 12. Going to the SEC, obviously, is an even nicer neighborhood. So they're going to have some catching up to do in terms of that, and not to mention just in terms of talent. That's a program that hasn't been to the postseason in a few years. But just in terms of the history of it, yeah, it's huge. Now, the programs that the Big 12 got to kind of fill in aren't bad. A program like Houston, for example, if they really get going again, that's a program that could end up, in Omaha at some point in the future. But it'll be a drop-off. I was impressed with the way the Big 12 was able to kind of patch the holes a little bit. But that's exactly what they're doing here, is patching holes. They're certainly never going to replace programs with the history of Texas and Oklahoma.
Now, you said you think everyone's going to have Texas up there up top. Blake online says, how could you have them number one after what happened last year with the national title? It's a completely different season, but from what it looks like with the folks they've got returning, the Longhorns, they're going to be a problem.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's the best pitching staff in the country. I mean, and it's exactly the type of pitching staff you want to have to be a national title contender, where it's, yes, they have big time talent that's going to go high in the draft that, pitched on Team USA. Guys like Tanner Witt, for example, is that kind of guy. They have guys who are just cagey veterans who know how to pitch at the college level. Tristan Stevens is that guy. He doesn't have, huge stuff, but he very successful college pitcher, has good enough stuff. Isn't going to be overwhelmed by any of the moment. They've got Pete Hansen, who's kind of in between those two guys. He's a little bit of a prospect, not as much of a prospect as Tanner Witt. And then they've got a lot of depth there. So I think it's the best pitching staff in the country. They do have some questions offensively, but if you go back and look at really the best teams that Texas has put together, certainly under Augie Garrido, but even recently, it's not really big time offense that is really doing the trick for them. Last year's offense was actually pretty good, but if you go back to 2018 when they got to Omaha, that was a team led by Cody Clemens having a massive year, and he didn't have a lot of help around him. So that is really not new territory for Texas to be in, where it's a big-time pitching staff and not as much on offense.
Well, but you look at the top 25, and it's loaded with schools. You mentioned, of course, Texas, but the SEC and the ACC are definitely lead the way. There are 9 teams from the SEC, 6 from the ACC. The first Big Ten team is Nebraska at number 20. And I think we talk about this every year, where college baseball is kind of a regional sport. Do you think we're getting closer, though, to a point where teams from up north can compete with teams from the South and from the Pac-12?
Yeah, I think so. And obviously the schools that play in nice weather are always going to have that natural advantage as long as the college baseball season starts, let's face it, in the middle of winter. That's always going to be the case. They're always going to have advantages. But I do think there is something to the fact that you look at the Big Ten and you've seen Michigan got one game away from a national title in 2019. Nebraska at this point is a perennial regional team. Indiana missed regionals last year, but that's a perennial regional team that's been to Omaha before. Every year at this point, the Big Ten is putting at least one team out that you could conceivably see getting to Omaha. And I think that's been a big shift in the way the Big Ten thinks about baseball, because I think that success shows other Big Ten programs that, hey, just because we have these disadvantages doesn't mean we can't go for it in baseball. It doesn't mean we can't invest in baseball. And so a lot of things are happening behind the scenes there. The quality of coaches is really good in that league. I think specifically of Michigan holding on to Eric Bakich. He's a rising star in the profession, and I would bet on him being at some point a high-level SEC or ACC coach at some point in the future. But I also wouldn't rule out Michigan holding on to him because they really are wanting to invest in staying at the top of the game in baseball. So they're doing all the right things in that conference. It's just they're always going to have that, things out of their control holding them back. Now, what I will say, because you and I have talked about this topic before, one thing that I think is changing, just maybe even since the last time you and I had this same conversation preseason last year, is that kind of similar to football, right? Where when we talk about, is a step back in a given season for Alabama, right? Like this past season for Alabama was thought of as a step back. And I guess you could say, okay, they lost a regular season game to Texas A&M in football, so that's a game they shouldn't have lost. And so even though they got to the national title game, like that's a version of Alabama taking a step back. But that's about as far as it goes. We saw it with Clemson this year. Like, that's one of the toughest seasons Clemson has had. Your listeners know this well, in a while. And yet, that was still a very good team when it was all said and done, right? I think we're seeing something like that in baseball happen now, where schools like Vanderbilt, schools like Mississippi State, schools like Arkansas, Ole Miss to a certain degree, they're not really taking steps back anymore. And their steps back are just defined differently, right? I mean, it used to be, you look even at a program like Mississippi State that just won a national title, every few years they would mix in a year where they're really just rebuilding and they might not make the postseason. Now, sure, could that happen if injuries or whatever hits? Sure. But those programs are really reloading year after year to the point where there's really no such thing for those programs as a rebuilding year anymore. And that's pretty new in college baseball. We're seeing it in football. I think that has leaked over into baseball a little bit. I'm not really exactly sure how to tell you why that's happening, but it is definitely something that we're seeing happening now.
Joe Healy from Baseball America joining us here on the program. South Carolina and Clemson were not in your rankings. Were either team close to making the cut?
I've got to be honest with you, Rob. No. We see those, and we haven't released our preseason field of 64 just yet. However, I can tell you we consider both of them bubble teams. I think they're actually kind of in similar places in terms of where we see them in the pecking order. They were both on the board. Like I said, they were both bubble teams for the field of 64. So, I can tell you they're in that discussion. Both programs kind of feel, South Carolina in particular feels like it's in a little bit of a transition. I think last year, you and I talked about they were really going for it last year. And look, when I came and sat in studio with you, I forget where they were ranked, but it was right. Top 10, when they played Arkansas. And so they had some high highs last year, but by the end of the season, it felt like they had been exposed a little bit, right? I mean, that was an offense that could hit the ball out of the ballpark, but if they weren't hitting the ball out of the ballpark, they weren't really scoring runs. And I think Mark Kingston has shifted gears now where they've brought in some guys in the transfer portal that are a little more athletic, that make a little more contact, that maybe can make things happen on the bases a little bit more. So I think though there will be positive steps in that regard, I just don't know if that's enough in the span of one off season for this team to be good enough to get through the rigors of the SEC. Certainly not to be any better than they were last year, because it's still worth mentioning that they hosted as a 2 seed. That's pretty doggone good in the grand scheme of things. I think this team is a step back. I think maybe long-term it's a step in the right direction in terms of building a team that can withstand, winning games in a lot of different ways. But I just don't think, this year's team, given what the SEC is destined to be any more than a bubble team. And maybe they'll surprise me, but certainly we're not betting on that at this point. With Carolina, if you're looking for reasons for optimism, you certainly like the front of the rotation with Julian Bosnick and then Will Sanders, who had a nice freshman year and pitched on Team USA. But, in the SEC, just about every team's got a good 1 and 2 in the rotation. So that doesn't necessarily set them apart. One thing they have going for them is the schedule is pretty reasonable. So I could actually see them being a team that's just maybe slightly above average, but because they got some scheduling breaks, they're able to kind of squeak their way in. They avoid LSU and Mississippi State from the other division. Instead, some of their cross-division opponents include Auburn, Alabama, Texas A&M. I think South Carolina is probably better on paper than all three of those teams. So that certainly helps. So that's something they certainly do have working for them. Clemson similarly is, I think Carolina is probably the more talented team. It's the team I like better. But the path to the postseason in the ACC is just a little bit easier. There are more teams in the ACC that Clemson will just be more talented than, and that can get them on the path to the regionals a little easier than South Carolina, where there are some teams, Auburn, for example, A&M, for example, that I think Carolina will be more talented than, but that might be Missouri. Certainly they're more talented than, but the list is pretty short on the teams in terms of they are definitely going to be more talented than, and that just makes their road a little bit tougher.
All right, so let's talk a little bit about, you mentioned the transfer portal. How big of a deal is that on the baseball front? We hear so much about it with football where guys are going from, in you look at the SEC West, you got guys going within the division, but is it as big of a deal on the college baseball front? Are we going to see a lot of guys moving around?
So I think yes. In terms of raw numbers, I think the numbers are going to continue to be staggering. I don't know what the exact number was in college baseball, but there were thousands of players in the portal. And some of those guys, it should be noted, some of those guys are fringy guys at mid-majors who, instead of transferring somewhere else, might just decide, I don't really want to do this anymore. I'm going to go to grad school and just go to school, or I'm just going to go get a job or whatever. So not everybody who's in the portal is necessarily going to end up somewhere else. But the volume was really high. So in terms of that, I will answer your question, yes. However, I think a big difference in football and even in basketball compared to baseball is that what really sets off the portal in football is quarterback transfers, right? Now, there are a lot of really talented players at other positions who are transferring, but we see, just because I saw it, a few days ago, Caleb Williams going from Oklahoma to USC. Like that immediately changes USC's entire outlook as a team. There are lots of other quarterbacks. That is also the case with Carolina there, right? Spencer Rattler coming into South Carolina. He, for all of his faults, could really change the outlook for the South Carolina team next year. Baseball, that's harder to do because it's a bigger roster. Even the best player in college baseball transferring from one school to another, and it should be noted, LSU just got an All-American in Jacob Berry from Arizona, who might be the best hitter in college baseball. And LSU is already a very good team. They didn't need him to necessarily be a great team. But even him going from one school to another only makes them a little bit better. There's only so much any one player can affect in baseball. And that's different, obviously, with quarterbacks in football. And then in basketball, you can only play 5 guys at a time. So having one guy who's much better than everyone else can make a big difference. So in baseball, I don't know that any 1 or 2 transfers is really going to change an entire team's outlook necessarily. But I do think in terms of the sheer numbers, I think this is the new normal. That, we're just going to see hundreds and thousands of guys at least jumping into the portal every year. And, coaches will complain. And I heard you when I was waiting to jump on here talking about crybaby coaches. And I have to assume part of what you're talking about there is, coaches have started, you're hearing a lot, especially on the football side, about coaches complaining about the transfer portal. And my rebuttal is always that, that makes your job a little bit harder. But like these kids deserve, I think, the opportunity to explore other opportunities. And that's what you get paid that money for, this is part of the game now. You have to re-recruit your whole roster. That is just part of the job at this point. And it makes their job a little bit tougher. But I think it's the right thing to do to give these kids that opportunity. So I don't think the rule is changing, and the schools and the coaches who adapt to this being the new normal are going to be the ones who are most successful with it.
All right. Well, I've got to mention the NIL before I get you out of here. Have you seen examples where college baseball players are able to make that extra money? We seem to hear so much about basketball and football, but are young players actually out there making some money on the baseball side?
Not anything big or splashy, I would say. I think there are some. I'm sure there are some examples out there that I'm just not aware of. You see some examples of players kind of doing, signing on with certain websites or things to do like video content or written content or stuff like that. So there's some stuff like that, but nothing big and flashy like we see in the other sports. I think where there's an opportunity here is with a program like Mississippi State. They announced, I believe it was middle of last year, maybe not long after the national title, when NIL legislation was first getting through, that they've essentially set up a program where the hope is that everyone on Mississippi State's baseball roster, will get something NIL related. We see this in football too, right? Like I think Miami is one of the programs in football who's doing something like this. Right. So I think for baseball, I think that's where a lot of these opportunities are going to come from. Not that there can't be chances for some of these kids, especially in the SEC, to make real money through NIL with some local businesses and what have you. But I think the team-wide stuff for these big-time schools that have big-time fan bases, particularly in the SEC, I think the team-wide stuff is where a lot of these baseball players are going to make their hay, because I mean the number of baseball players that nationally, and not locally, but nationally really move the needle is really, really short. I mean, Kumar Rocker was probably the most famous college baseball player in college baseball last year. I'm sure had NIL existed at that time, he could have gotten some money there. But beyond guys like that, it's relatively limited appeal nationally. So I'm sure we'll see some examples as the season gets going, but I don't anticipate it being any sort of, 6-7 figure game changer for most kids.
All right, final question with Joe Healy from Baseball America. Well, and it's about your top 25 with the preseason setup here. You've got Vanderbilt at 2, Mississippi State at 3, Florida at 6, Arkansas at 8, Mississippi at 9, and LSU at 10. I mean, you could theoretically throw those teams in a hat and possibly the Georgia Bulldogs and pull one of them out and make an argument that they could win the SEC. I mean, that is a steep conference this year.
Yeah, no doubt. And, you've got a couple wrinkles in there, right? Like, Georgia's not necessarily been a program year in, year out. They've had some nice years. They hosted in 2018 and 2019. But that's a program that I think is kind of gone a little under the radar. And part of that is because you've got these juggernauts in the top 10 among SEC programs. But Georgia's a team I think, you should keep an eye on, especially just in the East Division. It's a really veteran offense. It's a veteran lineup. It's not going to wow you. It's not LSU's lineup. It's not Arkansas's lineup in terms of power production, in terms of big names, but it's a really old team on the offensive side. And Georgia always pitches well. Last year, they got snake bitten with injuries on the pitching staff. I think just simply, if they were even a little bit healthier last year on the mound, that's a regional team. They missed it by maybe 1 or 2 games. So I think they flipped the script by being healthier on the mound. It's a really old offense. Being old in college baseball tends to say good things about your program. So, we've got these flashy names in the top 10, and they're deservedly up there in the top 10. But Georgia's flying a little, and they're ranked in all the polls. So it's not like we're out there by ourselves ranking Georgia. But that is definitely a team I think the larger college baseball public has maybe not quite caught on to how good they're going to be.
Yeah, but I mean, you can make an argument that any of those teams that I mentioned there, could win the SEC. I mean, it's not that far-fetched, and stringing them together in your rankings, I mean, that had to be tough. I mean, how do you? I mean, and I understand Vanderbilt's good, Mississippi State's good, and all of that, but ranking one on top of the other, that is just a tough way to go there. So, but you can find all of Joe's work at baseballofamerica.com, and of course, you're on Twitter as well, right?
That's right. Yeah, at Joe Healy BA on Twitter.
All right, Joe. Hey, man, thanks for joining us on the Rundown, man. And, of course, you're always welcome when you're in Columbia. There is a seat over here for you.
I appreciate it, Rob. I'm looking forward to it again.
All right, man. Thanks a lot. We'll see you later on.
Yeah, take care.
All right, talking a little college baseball today. I tell you what, doing my little bit of research last night, my goodness, with the SEC teams that are all up there, because I can assure you the folks at LSU think that they're going to win the West just as much as, win the conference just as much as Ole Miss and Arkansas and Florida and Mississippi State and Vanderbilt, and Georgia's right there in the mix too. It's going to be a dogfight in the SEC this year. All right, quick break. When we come back, you can respond to what Joe said. If you missed some of it, we'll have it up on the podcast. It'll be up at about 5 o'clock today. More of the rundown in just a moment. This is Fox Sports Radio 1400. Hey, give me just a second, guys. I'll be right back. I get some paper. Yes, origami. You guys are hilarious. Welcome back to the Rundown on Fox Sports Radio, 1400 803 978 1832. 803 978 1832. There's some rumbling going on with Alabama as their defensive coordinator is in jail. What a mess that turns into. I wonder how that worked out. Did Saban bail him out? Is that one of the things when he's in the state of Alabama, he should be like, hey, look at me. Don't you know who I am? That kind of thing. Wonder how that's going to work out. Anyway, we'll talk about that in a moment, but I've got to play you a couple of clips here. The first one is from Lane Kiffin talking about the NIL. And Lane Kiffin, let's make sure we put this out there. Lane Kiffin does not care what anyone thinks ever. He just doesn't care. He's one of those type of folks. Here's some comments, a comment he made about the NIL that is kind of interesting. Here we go.
We don't have the same funding resources as some of these schools do for these NIL deals, and so it's basically like dealing with different salary caps. We now have a sport that has completely different salary caps, and some of these schools are, whatever, 5-10 times more than everybody else of what they can pay the players. So I know nobody uses those phrases, but that is what it is. In free agency in the NFL, players usually go to the most money. Every once in a while they don't because they already have a bunch of money. Well, these kids are 17, 18 years old. They're going to go to where they're paid the most. I'm not complaining. It just is what it is. Whenever there's things created, there's a lot of times problems people didn't think about, and so you just legalize paying players what people used to cheat.
So, you know what? The reality is, and I know that there's a lot of people that are going to get upset when I say this, but I think I've said it before. This happens. What Lane Kiffin said is correct. And the kids are going to go where the money is. And you know what? You know who we can blame for this? The NCAA, because they put the NIL stuff out there And they let it go quickly because they were going to get sued and they were going to lose really bad. They were going to lose in court and look like a complete fool. Okay. And I'm talking about looking like a complete fool to the soccer moms and the folks that they'll watch, their college football a little bit here and there, but they're the casual fans. They were going to get fleeced so bad with the casual fans that they were not going to know how to act, which is why they hurried this NIL deal stuff out there. And there really is it's just, ta-da, do whatever you want to do. So Kiffin is right on one front. I think there's a little bit of bitterness there with him because, let's be honest, he's at a school where, they're an SEC program, but he's right. They may not have the capability to draw as much NIL money for some of the kids that go there. Now, I think it still comes back to this, though. We don't know a couple of things when a young man signs with a school. He may be the greatest player ever, or he may be a guy that transfers out. You never know. Now, you could put all of your money and all of that into them, but they may come to your program and not be good. The other thing, too, is that people, they seem to forget this. Schools only have so much space. Okay? They only have so many spots. There's only room for one quarterback. There's only room for, X amount of wide receivers. All right. So there's going to be players that are out there that are going to be good. They are going to be good. So let's make sure we put that out there. But Jimbo Fisher yesterday lost his damn mind. Some comments from what he said when he should be literally looking at people and saying, you know what? We worked hard. We got the number one class in the country, best in 247 sports history. And everybody else is trying to throw rocks at the throne. Thank you. Good luck with that. Or, hey, I'm Jimbo Fisher, and I came to Texas A&M. I've got my cowboy hat. I've got my big boy belt buckle and my cowboy boots. I'm trying to make myself a Texan, and by doing that, I've got to finish better than 8-4. That's what he should be saying. But he's saying things like this. Whoops.
The hypocrisy is a joke. It's an absolute joke, and it's insulting to our staff, how hard we work, to how we do things, and it's insulting to Texas A&M because there ain't a better place to go to school and play ball. If we don't like it, we're coming on. Get used to it. We ain't going nowhere.
Yeah, a better school to go and play ball. Sir, that is an absolute opinion of yours. There are several other schools that are really, really good, like, I don't know, the team that won the national title this year. You think it's not good to go to Georgia and play? I mean, they just won a national title. You think going to Alabama is not a good place to go? Oh, but you're the absolute best. Hey, come here and go 8-4. Yay! Let's all go 8-4 and come to Texas A&M. Let's try to do that. More from this silly man.
It's an absolute joke that people put the hard work in and do it. It's irresponsible, but it's funny when they get it, it's all okay. Ball games are changing, man. And it ain't because of NIL and what goes on. It's pretty irresponsible of all of them. They're clowns.
All right, so if it's not changing because of NIL, then what's making it change, sir? You're going to sit here and you're going to call people clowns, but you're not going to tell us, it's changing, but it's not because of NIL. Let's just stop with all the nonsense. You have the capability of putting together more money at Texas A&M because there is a ton of money there. That's nothing to be ashamed of. That's how they were able to afford you. And yet you're calling people clowns? It's kind of silly. A couple more comments here from Jimbo Fisher.
It's funny when Nick Saban said his quarterback got an $800,000 deal. It was wonderful. Now it ain't wonderful no more, huh? But ours, we ain't got that. Ours are on record what comes up. We ain't doing all them big deals. Ain't none on our place we know of. That's funny when you do it.
Yeah, so, all right. So do you really want to poke the bear in the eye? I know Nick Saban's old, but trust me, Nick Saban will remember that comment. And when you have to go to Alabama this year, and you've got all those 5-star guys that you quote unquote said you worked hard to get, you think Nick Saban's not going to drop the hammer down on you there? I think if he has the opportunity, he will. He really, really will. One more comment from Jimbo Fisher. It just gets better and better.
There is no $30 million fund. There is no $5 million. There is no 10. This is garbage. And it does. It pisses me off. And here it comes from a site called Bro Bible. by a guy named Sliced Bread. Then everybody runs with it. So it's written on the internet as gospel. How irresponsible is that? And then to have coaches in our league and across this league say it, clown acts. All right? Irresponsible as hell. Multiple coaches in our league. And the guy's griping about NIL, griping about transfer portal, using it the most and bragging about it the most. That's the ironic part. You want character? I'll take it with any of y'all. It's a joke. It does piss me off.
So some guy named Sliced Bread wrote something. I don't know who Sliced Bread is. I've heard of the Bro Bible site before, but I don't know who Sliced Bread is. Okay? There are people that write all the time. I mean, I write stuff on my blog page at Fox Sports Radio 1400, but there are people that are actual journalists that write things. Joe Healy, who we just had on, very respected guy on that front, but I've never heard of Sliced Bread. Okay? And here's the thing, Jimbo. Let me help you with this. Why in the world are you acknowledging an organization that you're calling a clown and giving them basically free advertising? Because there are more people, I assure you, that are probably going to check out your feed and all of that through the Texas A&M website. Why are you doing that? Maybe the clown, sir, maybe, just maybe with this set of statements that you put out there, maybe the clown is you. You really want to go and bash what other coaches in the league think because you don't like the way that some website covered you? Are you serious? We're at the point now, and you know what? And I think I've said this before. I gave Kirby Smart a lot of crap for not being able to get over the hump. Congratulations, sir. You are in that barrel now. That's just the way that it is. You've got all of this talent. Number one recruiting class in 247 sports history. They've given you everything in the world as far as money and all of that stuff. And the reality is that you're more interested in trying to take down Sliced Bread from Bro Bible and to mock coaches in your league. You're going with that. Then trying to build your program and not finish with an 8-win season. I pulled the rosters and stuff up for Texas A&M last season at a top 10 roster. They won 8 games. And I don't understand why we sit back and we're even with Kirby Smart would win the division. What is he done at Texas A&M? Congratulations, you beat Alabama this year. In a quote-unquote reloading year for Alabama, you beat them, and you still didn't win the division. We're supposed to think that you're the second coming? It's ridiculous. Clowns make statements like that. Well, Bro Bible said it, and Sliced Bread said it, so it's hurtful towards us. And stop it. It's ridiculous. 803-978-1832. Let's go out to the phones really quickly here. Welcome into the program. Good afternoon.
Hey, Rob. This is Scott from Hartsville, man.
Hey, Scott.
Seems like Jimbo was tugging on Superman's cape. Nick Saban. That's not a very good thing to do.
Nope.
I mean, there was a coach at Ole Miss who ran off at the mouth, and now he's been exiled to Liberty.
Yeah, he had problems with ladies of the evening, though. So
and recruiting.
Look, A&M doesn't have that problem. They've got talent there. I don't want to hear, oh, well, we have to play Nick. I don't want to hear it. You've got top-level talent. You're being paid as a top 5 coach. Stop having seasons where you win 8 games, and we're supposed to give you a life ring over it. Win national titles. Win the division. Let's try that. Texas A&M, I don't think they've ever played for the SEC title. Win the division.
No.
Let's start with that. Mizzou's got
Missouri
2 appearances in the SEC championship game.
Yeah.
A&M has 0. Let's try winning
South
the division,
Carolina
sir.
has one.
Yeah, South Carolina has 1 too. So there you go.
This goes all the way back to Jimbo's time at Florida State. He won it once. All that talent.
Mm-hmm. He
He
did.
started on third base.
Yep.
And he won it one time.
Yeah.
One-time dynasty.
Yep. He is the true edition of I call LSU fans one-hit wonders with their coaches, but he's definitely a one-hit wonder.
Well, I mean, he was the only coach who lost their defensive coordinator, who didn't even hire one, who kept adding defensive pieces at Texas A&M.
Yeah.
And he said they were going there because of the 12th man. He actually brought that up. We're home of the 12th man. That's why they want to come here.
Yeah, well, no, that's ridiculous.
And a few minutes ago, I saw our Kenny Pickett indoors with 2 gloves on, throwing the ball all over the place with his small hands.
Well, we'll have to figure that out with Kenny Pickett. I don't know. He may end up being great. Who knows at this point?
I know. I can tell you, it's not going to be great.
All right, Scott, I appreciate it, man. Thank you for calling the program. All right, let's get one more call before we go to break. Welcome into the rundown. Good afternoon.
Sliced bread is here. I am sliced bread.
You are sliced bread. Okay. Did you write the stuff to get Jimbo Fisher like that angry?
Yeah, he's whining. Tell him to stop that whining.
He needs to stop
Look,
whining.
Hey, what about that Florida Gay recruiting class? Where did they finish?
I think they finished what 20th, something like that.
Yeah.
I can't remember. Yeah, but I mean they were in the top 20. Yeah.
I think that's a great job.
Okay.
I love it.
Fair enough.
Late as it was, he got on late. We're gonna be all right.
Okay. Well, we'll see, man. Hopefully you'll have a decent season. We'll see.
Oh yeah, we'll be okay.
Well, your baseball team's going to be good. You should be talking about that.
We're always good in baseball.
Are you not a baseball fan? What's up with that?
Yes. Oh, yes.
Okay, well.
Now I'm back on top.
Well,
we're always good at baseball.
You should be talking about your baseball team. I think they're ranked 6th in the country.
We're going to be okay. Baseball is not a problem.
All right. Well, thank you for calling the show, sir. We appreciate it.
No doubt.
All right. There you go. The man claiming to be sliced bread. The man that pissed off Jimbo Fisher. Funny. More of the rundown. We come back. This is Fox Sports Radio 1400. Hey, if you guys go back and watch some of Napier's coaching decisions, if you watch some of his games, he had some games where he looked like he was flat. I'm not buying the whole, this is going to be the guy forever and blah, blah, blah. He may end up being great, but man, there were some plays that he called and some decisions that he made that he looked really stupid at some points. So just saying. Yep. Blake says Napier seems like he smoked a joint and never came back. Okay. Hollywood starts every AM with 12 rounds. That is mean and funny all at the same time. That's a good point, James. You need a crab stealing, raping quarterback. I love when you talk to Florida State fans about Jameis Winston, where they've actually made movies about how he was basically a sexual predator, and they still defend him. Yeah, he's out raping girls on campus, but he won a national title. Hey. Scared money don't make money. If they make movies about you being a racist, you're probably not the best person. That's a good point, Elijah. I mean, welcome back to the rundown on Fox Sports Radio 1400 around the world on the iHeartRadio app. I'm Rob Sanders. Thanks for joining us today as we roll around the world of college football, and we talked a little baseball today. If you want to call up and sound off on the NIL stuff, I mean, Lane Kiffin's comment makes a lot of sense. Basically, it was put out there, and there's not really a question and answer segment. It's just kind of, all right, just go do it. So other coaches have made some comments. Eli Drinkowitz says, I have a philosophy of what we're trying to do, which is we're always going to build our program based on high school players and player development, just because that's who I am as a former high school football coach, he said on SEC This Morning. When asked about the transfer portal, he says, the reason I got into coaching is because I love interacting with young men and coaching football and developing players and going out to practice and seeing improvement. So that's where we're always going to start. I think there's a good, that's a good way to look at it. Hold on, let's go back out to the phones. Welcome into the rundown. Good afternoon.
Hey, it's Big Barney Ross. Got a question for you.
Yeah, man.
What do you think's going through Jeremy Pruitt's mind as he's watching Jimbo Fisher talk about a $30 million slush fund he has to pay college kids with? You know, if he'd have waited another year, think of all the McDonald's bags that could have been recycled. Talk about cleaning up the ecology. I'll get off here and listen to what you have to say about that.
Yeah, that's a very valid point. Jeremy Pruitt's sitting around thinking, man, just one more year. Just one more year. By the way, I'm looking forward to SEC Media Days this year. And I'll tell you why. Because all these coaches are going to be aligned. I mean, they'll go day by day. But if I'm one of the folks that's putting the SEC Media Days together, I'm putting on day one, I want Alabama, Texas A&M, and Ole Miss all on the same day. I want those coaches to have to interact with each other, because that would be some good, that'll get you some good coverage there in July when everybody's out at the beach. I am really thinking that's going to be the way to go. Hopefully they'll do that. Not to knock all the other coaches that are out there, but those three coaches, of course, Kiffin's going to say whatever he wants. Jimbo Fisher's a crybaby, and Nick Saban has been basically, I guess you could say, called out by Jimbo Fisher. So there's that. That would be some great television. If you're Commissioner Sankey needs to make that happen over there in the SEC. Quick break. When we return, we'll wrap up today's edition of The Rundown. This is Fox Sports Radio 1400. Yeah, I read Colby's up there. Someone said you got into a debate with somebody. That would be interesting. Who pissed in your cornflakes, Colby? Yeah, the SEC Media Days, you're right, Alan. They're going to be really good. They really are. Yeah, that was not a good look. I don't think Colby ignores anybody there, Jay. Craziness. Welcome back to the Rundown on Fox Sports Radio 1400, of course, around the world on the iHeartRadio app. As we roll along here this afternoon on Fox Sports Radio, a couple of things we're going to get to beforehand before we wrap up the show. Interesting stat that I found earlier today. Texas A&M, since we're talking about Jimbo the Crier, crying old Fisher, they have 4 straight top 10 classes. Think about that. 4 straight top 10 classes. So the pressure has to be on down there, right? I mean, you have to think, okay, 4 straight top 10 recruiting classes, paying Jimbo Fisher a ton of money. Talent is there. They've got the facilities. How long before it's almost like it's a national title or bust type mentality? If you really stop and think about it, having seasons like you had this year where you go 8-4 is not very good. It's just not going to work. I mean, if you look at the division, Arkansas won 9 games this year. They don't have half the recruiting that you've got. I can't even, when you look at Texas A&M in the past, let's see here. They've not had double-digit wins since 2012. Okay? Maybe that's what you should aspire to do. Instead of calling everybody clowns, go out and win 10 games. Other teams do it. Seriously. 8 wins, 9 wins, 8 wins, 9 wins, 7 wins, 8 wins, 8 wins. It's just you're not getting the most out of your investment. I'm sure that with the talent that they've got there, they should be better than they are. But we just get crying. All right, 803-978-1832, 803-978-1832. Some comments from the chat room. Jay says Lane is waiting for Saban to leave Alabama. That might be true. Elijah says if Nick Saban's upset, that does not bode well for the rest of the SEC. Look, I think Nick Saban's above all that. I mean, he really is. Okay, you guys are all arguing or whatever. We're just going to continue to win here. And by the way, we'll take some of your best players and they can come here too. I think that's kind of where Nick Saban's at. Blake says, to be fair, A&M went 8-1 in the COVID year with 1 loss at Alabama. And I get that. If you want to play the COVID card, that's fine. 803-978-1832, 803-978-1832. Alan says Jimbo is officially on the hot seat. I don't think, wouldn't it be, anybody be shocked if in 2 years from now, if they stumble that he's gone? I think they'll give him this year. But you can make an argument that people are looking around like, got recruits, you've got money, you've got facilities. You play in a tough conference. Why is it that we're not winning national top? Why can't we win the division? Yeah, I'm at the point now with him. After those comments, it's like, all right, dude, whatever. We got to get the over and under numbers when that comes out of where people think Texas A&M is going to be next season. You know, there are some folks, some of the too early top 25s have them. Oh, well, they're going to be like number 4 in the country. They don't even know who their quarterback is yet. But, they're going to be number 4 in the country. Okay. Generally, to win that national title, you got to have at least a seasoned quarterback. They don't know who their quarterback's going to be. Calzada, the guy that beat Alabama, is going to play in Auburn this year. I mean, when you think about that, there you go with that situation. Calzada thought it was better to go to Auburn, who can't keep offensive coordinators, than to stay at Texas A&M. 803-978-1832, 803-978-1832. That is the number to dial if you'd like to join us here on the rundown as we wrap up today's show here on Fox Sports Radio 1400. Tomorrow on the program, LaVon Kirkland's going to join us. We're going to talk about some NFL stuff. There's a couple of things I want to get into with him because he's been on that side of it. The first is Coach Hugh Jackson being told, basically being encouraged to lose games so they can tank for draft picks. Really? I wonder, do you really think that happens? I know if you're a fan of a crummy team, you're kind of hoping, look, we're sitting, it's, in a 17-game season, we're sitting at 4-12. If we lose this game, we're going to get the absolute number one pick. No one's going to care about this game. I don't like the way the NFL does it. I think they should do it like a lottery system or something, but we'll see. Colby says Jimbo only recruits because of the boosters. That's true. That's pretty much proven that way. He had good recruiting classes at Florida State too. I'm just not on the Jimbo Fisher plan. And it's even funnier now that he's crying. Really? Blake says, talking about Brian Flores, if his claims are true, does that mean that the Dolphins GM hired him just to pad his resume? Yeah, I'm going to ask LaVon Kirkland about that too, or just get his thoughts on it. They have the Rooney Rule in the NFL, and I think that's more of a hindrance than anything else. And I'll tell you why. I think that the average owner wants to do two things. They want to make money and they want to win championships. They want to win. Okay. And I think that when they're hiring a coach, they're going to pick who they want that they think is going to bring them to whatever the next level is. So I think that being forced to interview a candidate of color is not, I don't understand how that makes things better. Yeah, it's going to get to a point where the majority of the league has great assistants that are going to be able to move up. Eric Bieniemy and guys like that, they should be able to get a job. And it shouldn't come down to the color of your skin. Hey, I get an interview because I'm a black guy. Or I'm a Native American. I get an interview because of that. That's insulting to those coaches. Hey, we're going to interview Eric Bieniemy because he's a black guy. We've already picked out our other guy. I think the Rooney Rule is just not very good. And of course, that comes from the Pittsburgh Steelers, who have the longest tenured coach, I believe, in the NFL, right up there behind Bill Belichick. And their coach, they have stability there. I don't know. That whole NFL coaching thing is a mess. Absolute mess. All right, tomorrow on the program, LaVon Kirkland joins us. Don't forget my buddy, Lawton Swan from Clemson Sports Talk is next. He is the czar of Clemson Sports. Follow him at Clemson Sports on Twitter.
Stop looking at me, Swan.
He's got the defensive coordinator for Clemson retweeting his stuff now, which is actually kind of funny. Be sure to check that out. As apparently he watches what clothes that these guys wear to press conferences. That's where Lawton Swan is. Go follow him on Twitter at Clemson Sports. I'm on Twitter at Rob Sounds Good. I'll be up and tweeting some stuff tonight. But LaVon Kirkland joins us tomorrow. We'll talk with him then. This is Fox Sports Radio 1400. All right, guys. Appreciate y'all. We'll see you later on. Thank you, guys.